Chapter 10. The Oldest Mafia in the World. When people hear the word mafia, they usually think of Sicily. But the Camorra was born earlier, around the 1600s, in the crowded, poverty-stricken streets of Naples. The city was under Spanish rule, corrupt from top to bottom and filled with people struggling to survive. Out of that desperation came small neighborhood gangs called Camorre, a local word for fight. They began as loose groups of enforcers who offered protection to local merchants for a price. As the years passed, they grew stronger. By the 1800s, the Camorra had become so powerful that it controlled nearly every part of Neapolitan life: gambling, docks, markets, even prisons. Inside the jails, the Camorra ruled like a shadow government. They had bosses, soldiers, judges, and their own system of punishment. When inmates were released, they carried that organization into the streets, turning crime into a structured business. Unlike the Sicilian Mafia, which stayed hidden, the Camorra operated openly. Their members were tailors, bakers, or fishmongers by day, criminal bosses by night. They lived among the people, collected taxes from businesses, and ran the neighborhoods like private kingdoms. Because there was no single leader, no godfather, the Camorra was impossible to destroy. It wasn't a pyramid, it was a web, many small families tied together by money and fear. Arrest one boss, and another clan immediately replaced him. That flexibility made them immortal. While governments rose and fell, the Camorra adapted. They bribed police, controlled local officials, and quietly merged crime with politics. Over time, Naples became a city where the Camorra wasn't just an underworld. It was the system itself. Number 9. The Camorra once controlled an election. By the mid-1800s, Italy was unifying under Garibaldi, and Naples was in chaos. The new government struggled to maintain control, so it did something unthinkable. It asked the Camorra for help. Garibaldi's men secretly allowed Camorra bosses to act as peacekeepers to stabilize the city. It was a deal with the devil, and it worked. The Camorra restored order, but in exchange, it gained power inside the government itself. From that point on, the Camorra wasn't just influencing politics, it was running it. During elections, they controlled who could vote, who could campaign, and who would win. Intimidation, bribery, and violence turned democracy into a business. In Naples, ballots were worth as much as bullets. Politicians who didn't cooperate were silenced. Those who did were rewarded with protection and votes. Their political reach reached a scandalous peak in 1911 during the Cutolo trial, named after Gennaro Cutolo, a former member murdered after threatening to expose Camorra corruption. The investigation revealed that judges, police officers, and city officials were all on the Camorra's payroll. It was the first time Italians realized that their own government was being controlled from the shadows. Newspapers called it the trial of the century. But even with witnesses and evidence, the organization barely flinched. They bribed jurors, intimidated reporters, and walked free more than once. When some leaders were finally convicted, the Camorra didn't collapse. It adapted again, splitting into smaller, faster groups that the authorities couldn't track. The scandal proved a terrifying truth. The Camorra didn't just survive by violence, it survived by becoming part of the system. Where the law ended, they began. And in Naples, that line blurred completely. For ordinary citizens, the Camorra wasn't an enemy. It was a reality. It provided work, protection, and justice, twisted but efficient. That's why, even after the Cutolo trial and decades of crackdowns, the Camorra never disappeared. It simply went quiet, waiting for the next opportunity to rise. And when Italy entered the 20th century, that opportunity came. A broken economy, smuggling routes, and post-war chaos would make the Camorra richer and more powerful than ever before. Year 8, the Camorra's Invisible Empire, Smuggling, and the System. After World War II, Naples was a city of ruins and hunger. The economy collapsed, jobs vanished, and desperation filled every street. But where ordinary people saw disaster, the Camorra saw opportunity. They didn't rebuild with bricks, they rebuilt with black markets. And what began as cigarette smuggling soon evolved into one of the most profitable criminal empires in Europe. The Camorra took control of the city's ports, its lifeline to the world. American soldiers stationed in Italy sold cigarettes and supplies for extra cash, and the Camorra quickly turned that into business. They bought these goods cheap, smuggled them through underground networks, and resold them at sky-high prices. Within a few years, Naples had become the center of illegal trade across the Mediterranean. Ships full of missing cargo arrived at night, and no one dared ask where the goods went. The brilliance of the Camorra was not just in what they did, but how they did it. They didn't have a single leader or clear hierarchy. Dozens of clans controlled different neighborhoods, each running its own operations: smuggling, extortion, money-lending, or construction. Sometimes they fought, sometimes they cooperated, but they were all part of what locals called il sistema, the system. It was crime so deeply woven into daily life that most Neapolitans couldn't imagine the city without it. Every bar owner, shopkeeper, and builder paid the pizzo, the protection tax. Pay it, and your business was safe. Refuse, and your store might burn overnight. The Camorra called it protection, but everyone knew it was extortion. Yet for many, it felt like the only way to survive. The government was distant and weak. The Camorra was fast and effective. They solved disputes, punished thieves, and even lent money. In a strange way, they became both criminals and caretakers. By the 1970s, their reach extended beyond Naples. They smuggled heroin from Turkey, cocaine from South America, and arms through the Balkans. The profits were enormous, and so was the bloodshed. Rival clans turned the streets into war zones. Drive-by shootings, kidnappings, and assassinations became part of daily life. Still, the Camorra endured. Whenever one clan fell, two others took its place. Law enforcement couldn't cut off the head of the snake because there was no single head. That lack of structure made the Camorra terrifyingly modern. It was flexible, decentralized, and fast to evolve, just like today's global corporations. They were criminals, but they understood business better than most CEOs. And soon one man would rise above the rest, a man who tried to give the Camorra order, discipline, and a single ruthless vision. His name was Raffaele Cutolo. Torca 7. Raffaele Cutolo. The Professor of Crime. Raffaele Cutolo was born in 1941 in Ottaviano, near Naples, a poor, volcanic town where violence was a part of life. As a teenager, he was reckless, charming, and dangerous. At 22, he killed a man in a bar fight and was sentenced to prison. But instead of being crushed by prison, Cutolo thrived in it. He studied people, read obsessively, and learned how to control men with words rather than weapons. Inmates began calling him Il Professore, the professor. Cutolo believed the Camorra had lost its strength. The clans were too divided, too undisciplined. So, from his prison cell, he decided to rebuild it, stronger, more united, more powerful. He founded the Nuova Camorra Organizzata, NCO, the New Organized Camorra. It wasn't just a gang, it was a movement. Members swore oaths of loyalty, prayed before icons of saints, and treated Cutolo like a spiritual leader. His rules were absolute. Disobey, and death was certain. Under his command, the NCO became a financial and military machine. Cutolo ran extortion rackets, took over drug routes, and infiltrated construction companies. Even from behind bars, he communicated through lawyers, priests, and coded letters. He promised his followers money, respect, and purpose, and in Naples that was enough to recruit thousands. But his rise came with blood. The older clans refused to kneel to his rule. By the early 1980s, Naples descended into a mafia war between Cutolo, SNCO, and a rival coalition called Nuova Famiglia, the New Family, backed by the Sicilian Mafia. bombings, drive-bys, and public executions turned the city into a war zone. Over 1,000 people died in just a few years. Innocent bystanders were caught in the crossfire. Even children weren't always spared. Cutolo's influence, however, went beyond violence. He knew how to use power symbolically. He helped negotiate the release of a kidnapped politician in 1981 directly from prison, proving that the Italian government had to talk to him. He was no longer just a gangster. He was a political actor. Newspapers described him as the man who ruled the streets from his cell. But power built on fear never lasts. The state eventually isolated him in a high-security prison, cutting off all communication. His empire collapsed, his allies betrayed him, and the NCO splintered into smaller factions. Yet, even in defeat, Cutolo left behind a legacy that shaped the Camorra for generations. His version of order, religious loyalty, strict hierarchy, and secret codes became the model for many modern clans. In the end, Cutolo proved something chilling, that a single man, armed only with words and faith, could build an empire of death. He didn't just reorganize crime, he redefined it. And even today, decades after his fall, the Camorra still breathes with the rhythm he created. Number 6. The Women of the Camorra, Queens of a Violent Empire. In most stories about organized crime, women are kept in the background, silent wives or grieving mothers. But in the Camorra, women were never just bystanders. When the men were arrested, killed, or hiding from police, it was often their wives, sisters, or daughters who kept the clans alive. And in many cases, they didn't just maintain power, they seized it. One of the most famous examples is Immacolata Capone, known on the streets as the godmother of Naples. When her husband, a powerful clan boss, was murdered, she took control of his empire overnight. Under her leadership, business continued smoothly, drugs, extortion, and arms deals, all run by a woman who commanded as much fear as any man. In a culture that worshipped masculinity, that was revolutionary. And she wasn't alone. Over the decades, dozens of women rose within the Camorra's ranks. Some ruled through intelligence and diplomacy, others through sheer brutality. They learned the rules of the underworld early: loyalty above all, silence always, and violence when necessary. When police raided homes, it was often the women who managed the money, the drugs, and the communications. They used their invisibility to their advantage. No one suspected them, which made them deadly. One of the most chilling figures was Assunta Maresca, nicknamed Pupetta, the little doll. Beautiful, elegant, and ruthless, she became a national icon of both revenge and rebellion. When her husband was assassinated, Pupetta didn't wait for justice. She hunted down his killer and shot him dead in broad daylight. Newspapers romanticized her story, calling her the woman who killed for love. But in truth, it was something deeper. She had proven that in the Camorra, even vengeance was a form of power. Modern-day investigations reveal that the Camorra's female leaders are some of its most efficient strategists. They handle money laundering, manage construction fronts, and coordinate international trafficking with a precision that rivals corporate executives. Some have been nicknamed La Zia, the ant, a term that hides the reality that they rerunning multi-million-euro operations. Their influence shows how deeply the Camorra blends into Neapolitan culture. It's not just a gang, it's a family business. And when the men fall, the women step forward. In some clans today, female bosses are even more feared than their husbands ever were. Year 5. The Garbage Kings. How the Camorra made billions from waste. If there's one story that captures the dark genius of the Camorra, it's their control of garbage. Not drugs, not weapons, garbage. Because in modern Italy, trash is money. And the Camorra turned that dirty business into a gold mine. It began in the 1990s, when Italy's northern factories faced a problem: tons of toxic waste that were expensive to dispose of legally. Enter the Camorra. They offered a cheaper solution: dump everything in the south, no questions asked. Industrial waste, chemicals, even radioactive materials, they took it all. Truckloads of poison began pouring into Campania, buried under fields, dumped in quarries, or burned at night to avoid detection. The clans charged industrial clients a fraction of the official cost and pocketed billions. To cover their tracks, they used fake recycling companies and falsified documents. In one of the largest scandals ever uncovered, investigators found entire villages built on contaminated soil. Local farmers unknowingly grew vegetables on toxic land, and children played in fields laced with asbestos and mercury. This horrifying scheme earned the Camorra another nickname, the Garbage Kings. They had turned the environment itself into a criminal market. Even when the government sent the army to manage Naples' trash crisis in the early 2000s, the Camorra still found ways to profit, controlling contracts, sabotaging waste plants, and creating chaos only they could solve. But the genius of their system was its disguise. The Camorra didn't operate in secrecy. They worked through legitimate businesses. Construction firms, logistics companies, and even government contractors all had invisible ties to the clans. It wasn't about guns anymore. It was about paperwork. The power of signatures replaced the power of bullets, and that made them harder to fight. When authorities arrested killers, new ones appeared. But when they tried to stop corruption buried inside public contracts, it was like cutting smoke. The Camorra had evolved from gangsters into businessmen. Their boardroom was the city of Naples. Their investors were corporations too afraid or too greedy to resist. The environmental damage they caused is still being measured today. Vast areas north of Naples are called the Triangle of Death, where cancer rates are far above average due to toxic pollution. Thousands of lives were destroyed quietly, not by gunfire, but by greed. And yet, for years, the money kept flowing. That's what makes the Camorra different from every other mafia in the world. They don't just control crime. They monetize every weakness of the system. Poverty, corruption, pollution, it's all just another opportunity. And in the process, they've proven that modern organized crime doesn't need to hide in the shadows. It can thrive right in front of everyone disguised as business. Year 4. The Camorra's Global Network. From Naples to the world. By the start of the 21st century, the Camorra was no longer just a Neapolitan problem. It had gone global. From Spain to South America, from Africa to Eastern Europe, their influence stretched far beyond the narrow streets where it was born. While police forces were busy tracking traditional mafia families in Sicily, the Camorra quietly expanded across continents, building alliances, laundering billions, and reinventing crime for the modern world. It started with drugs. When the Sicilian Mafia's old heroin routes began to crumble, the Camorra filled the void. They partnered directly with South American cartels, importing cocaine through European ports like Gioia Tauro, Valencia, and of course, Naples. But unlike other mafias, they didn't centralize operations. Each clan handled its own deals, avoiding large-scale exposure. One shipment might belong to the Casalesi clan, another to the Licciardi or the Millardo. Everyone competed, but everyone profited. From there, they expanded into Africa, trading weapons for diamonds and minerals. In Eastern Europe, they smuggled counterfeit goods, designer handbags, electronics, even medicines, produced in Chinese factories and shipped through Italy. In Spain's Costa del Sol, Camorra clans laundered their dirty money through luxury real estate and beach resorts, blending crime with tourism so perfectly that even locals couldn't tell the difference. And while their international empire grew, Naples remained their home base, the beating heart of Il Sistema. It was there that money flowed in and out, washed clean through restaurants, construction firms, and offshore accounts. Police estimates suggest the Camorra's combined annual revenue may exceed that of some Fortune 500 companies. Drugs, waste, construction, counterfeit goods, fuel smuggling, online scams, they were in everything. What made the Camorra unbeatable was its ability to adapt faster than law enforcement. They used technology to communicate in coded messages, recruited hackers, and even invested in cryptocurrency long before most governments understood it. Every arrest, every investigation just made them smarter. Like water, they found cracks in every wall built to stop them. The European Union has called them one of the most complex criminal systems in existence, a network without borders, constantly shifting faces. Their success proves one frightening truth. Globalization didn't weaken the Mafia, it made it stronger. And the Camorra, with its decentralized model, was built for it. Number 3. The Camorra in pop culture when crime becomes entertainment. In the 2000s, the Camorra's brutality exploded into the public eye through one unlikely source: cinema. In 2008, the Italian film Camorra, based on journalist Roberto Saviano's book, exposed the organization's crimes in painful detail: drug trafficking, toxic waste, child assassins, and the suffocating grip of corruption. The film won awards worldwide, but its impact in Naples was far more dangerous. For the first time, the world saw the Camorra not as an exotic mafia fantasy, but as a living, breathing nightmare. Saviano's book and the later HBO TV series painted a grim portrait of everyday life under Il Sistema. In the neighborhoods of Scampia and Secondigliano, children grew up idolizing drug dealers, not football players. Young boys were recruited as lookouts or gunmen, trained to kill before they could legally drive. The streets became both playground and battlefield. The Camorra wasn't hiding. They were celebrated, feared, and imitated. The global success of Camorra was double-edged. On one hand, it exposed the cruelty of the organization. On the other, it turned Camorra culture into something disturbingly fascinating. Teenagers began copying the fashion, the slang, even the swagger of fictional gangsters. Some Camorra bosses reportedly loved the show, seeing themselves as celebrities. That, as the strange curse of pop culture, it can condemn evil and glorify it at the same time. Meanwhile, Roberto Saviano, the author who dared to write it all down, paid the ultimate price for truth. Since 2006, he has lived under permanent police protection, targeted by multiple clans for assassination. His life became a symbol of the deadly cost of speaking against the Camorra. And yet, despite his isolation, his book forced Italy and the world to confront an uncomfortable reality. This wasn't history. It was happening now. The Camorra's influence on culture didn't stop with film and television. Music, fashion, even social media have been touched by its shadow. Rap songs glorify street clans. TikTok videos celebrate young bosses, and flashy lifestyles funded by crime are broadcast to millions. It's the perfect illusion, power without consequence. But the truth remains grim. Behind every Instagram photo of easy money lies a city still haunted by poverty, fear, and blood. What Camorra revealed most clearly was how deeply the Camorra had embedded itself into the DNA of Naples. For generations, it became not just a criminal organization, but a twisted identity, a reflection of survival in a city abandoned by institutions. And for many young Neapolitans, joining Il Sistema still feels like the only way to rise above hopelessness. The Camorra's presence in pop culture shows something chilling. When crime becomes normalized, it doesn't need to hide anymore. It becomes entertainment. And that's when it's most dangerous, when people stop fearing it and start admiring it. Number 2. The modern Camorra. The mafia that runs like a corporation. Today, the Camorra doesn't just survive, it thrives. While other mafia groups have struggled under government pressure, the Camorra has evolved into something far more sophisticated. It no longer needs secret meetings in basements or coded handshakes under candlelight. Its power flows through companies, contracts, and banks. It has become a corporation of crime. Investigators describe modern Camorra clans as business units. They specialize in different sectors: construction, shipping, real estate, drugs, finance, and waste management. Each clan has its own board of directors, financial advisors, and lawyers. They invest in legitimate enterprises across Europe, often using shell companies in Luxembourg or Switzerland to launder profits. Their reach now stretches from the streets of Naples to the skyscrapers of London and Dubai. One of the most powerful clans, the Casalesi, perfected this model. Instead of relying solely on violence, they infiltrated Italy's public contracts. They won tenders to build highways, housing, and even hospitals, projects financed by the European Union. Behind the paperwork and the briefcases, however, were the same old rules: intimidation, bribery, and silence. Anyone who refused to cooperate faced threats or sudden accidents. But the Camorra's power doesn't only lie in money, it lies in speed. They move faster than governments. When a new market opens, like renewable energy or online gambling, they're the first to enter. They find loopholes before lawmakers even know they exist. It's not just organized crime anymore, it's organized innovation. What makes this evolution terrifying is its invisibility. Gone are the old-style bosses flaunting gold chains and limousines. Today's Camorra leaders dress like entrepreneurs, attend business conferences, and donate to charity. Some even appear in photos with politicians. To the outside world, they look legitimate. But behind the scenes, they're orchestrating billion-dollar operations with the same ruthlessness their ancestors used with knives and pistols. And despite decades of police work, the Camorra S structure remains unbreakable because it S not built on one man, S power, it S built on everyone, S fear. Naples may have changed, but its unwritten law still stands. Speak against Il Sistema, and you disappear. That's why, even in the 21st century, the world's oldest mafia continues to outlive governments, crush rivals, and rewrite the rules of organized crime. Number 1. The legacy of fear. Why the Camorra still rules. Naples. After 4 centuries, one question remains. Why can't Naples break free from the Camorra? The answer lies not in violence, but in psychology. The Camorra doesn't rule through guns. It rules through dependence. It has made itself part of everyday life. When the government fails to fix a road, the Camorra pays for it. When banks refuse loans, they lend money in cash. When people lose jobs, they offer work, even if that work is illegal. In the poorest neighborhoods, they act like protectors, handing out food and helping families pay rent. But behind every act of generosity lies control. They create loyalty by replacing the state, and once people depend on them, there's no turning back. For many in Naples, the Camorra is both curse and necessity, a system of survival in a world that keeps forgetting them. Even children grow up learning its language. They know who controls which street, which family to avoid, which name to whisper. Fear is inherited like an accent. It's not that people admire the Camorra, they've just never known life without it. And yet, amid the darkness, there are signs of resistance. Activists, priests, and teachers across Naples have started fighting back, building schools, organizing protests, and teaching kids that they don't have to follow Il Sistema. Every mural painted, every business refusing to pay protection money, every young person choosing a different path, that's rebellion. It's slow, dangerous, and often invisible, but it's real. The Camorra's legacy isn't just about crime. It's about the struggle for dignity in a city where hope has been stolen for generations. And that's what makes their story so haunting. It's not just about gangsters, it's about the human cost of corruption, fear, and survival. 400 years later, the Camorra still stands. Not because it's invincible, but because it's adaptable. It doesn't need kings or palaces to rule. It rules wherever people lose faith in justice. And until that faith returns, Il Sistema will live on. In every alley, every handshake, every deal made in the shadows of Naples. Because the Camorra isn't just part of history. It is history, still unfolding. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like this video and share it to spread awareness about how the world's oldest mafia still shapes our modern age. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the secret histories that most people never hear about. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss new uploads each week. And if you want to support our work directly, join as a channel member or leave a super thanks. Every contribution helps us uncover more hidden stories from the past and present.